Hello and welcome. My name's George, and my channel's all about helping you get the most out of your home studio so that you can record and produce your best music. Today, we're going to be looking at how you can get big and punchy drums using Steven Slate's Trigger 2. And this is a drum replacement software plugin. I'm going to show you everything you need to know, so let's dive in. Okay, so I've got my mix session opened up here. This is a song called Wide Awake from an artist named Moondrifter. I've currently got some sample replacement going on with the kick, the snare, and the room mics as well for the kick and snare. So I'll start by letting you hear what that sounds like with the sample replacements, and then I'll mute all those mics so you can see how that affects it. So there you go. So you can hear with Trigger activated that I have a lot more punch in my kick and snare, and the room mics makes the whole kit sound that much bigger. So I'm going to show you how I accomplish that. So let's start by getting rid of those sample replace tracks. So I'm going to delete my kick, delete the snare replace, and delete these rooms as well. So I'll just quickly show you how I've got this routed here. So to start, I've got two kick tracks. I've got my regular kick as well as a sub kick, and individually they sound like this. So that sub is really meant to be blended in with another kick mic, and together the two sound like this. So I really want to get some more punch out of that kick. So the Steven Slate Trigger is going to help me do that. And you'll see here I have my two current kick mics going to bus 11, which is this track right here, which is set to input bus 11. And then that track is going out to my main drum bus, which is here, bus 13. So all my drums are ending up into this drum bus. So what I'm going to do is create a new track. And I can just duplicate this sub track here, and I'll rename this kick replace. And I want to make sure that it's outputting to the right place. So bus 11, which is going to our kick bus track. So that's what we want. And the next is to copy our kick track down to our new replace track. So right now we've just doubled up this kick track. And what we need to do next is put Trigger 2 on to this track. So if I go down here to my kick replace track, under audio effects, go down to audio units, then Steven Slate, Trigger 2. And for the kick, I'm just going to stick with mono here. And if we just solo the kick replace for now and press play, you can see Trigger detecting the hits, but we're not triggering anything yet because we haven't loaded a sample into Trigger yet. So to do that, we're going to go to the browser, and then here we'll go to our kicks, and you can see all the different kicks available to us. So we can try some different ones, and under each folder, you'll notice 4 and sometimes 3 and sometimes even 5 different options. So these first two, these are room mics. We'll talk about the room mics a little bit later. And then the Z1 and the Z3, these are the actual kick mics. So the Z1 is going to be a blend of close mics and overheads, and they're going to be mostly unprocessed. The Z2, on the other hand, which we don't have in this kit, that will have a little bit of compression already applied to the sample. And then the Z3, this is going to be the driest option. So it'll have mostly just close mics and very little overheads in it. So if you're going for really dry sound, then look for the Z3. So we can audition this, for example, put in that Z1 and see what that sounds like. And then you can just go ahead and audition some different kicks to see what works best for the song and the sound you're going for. It's a good idea to make sure that they actually blend with your original kick as well. When I was going through these earlier, I liked for this song the kick number 10. So I'll load that in simply by dragging that on. And then while I'm in here, I'll mention that you see you have these different squares down here, and these are different channels. So you can load in more samples. So I could load in a room sample at the same time. And you can hear what that sounds like. And if I go to triggering, then here in my mixer, I can set the balance for the room mic. So if I want to just blend that in a little bit, I can bring this down. Like so. I'm going to remove the room mics for now because I'm going to process those on their own a little bit later. So to clear that sample, I just right-clicked in this box and hit clear. Now, one of the main settings you want to look at in the plugin itself is this detail plugin. And that's going to tell Trigger when to actually trigger the sample. So you can see here these two lines, and as I increase the detail, those will go higher. And as I bring it down, it'll go smaller. So if I make this really wide, then Trigger might not actually trigger the sample. So you can see the main hits are getting caught, but these secondary hits are not. So I want to lower this to make sure that those get captured as well. But you don't want to go too far down and get some of the snare bleed that's in there. Now, one other knob that's useful to know about is this mix knob right here. So you can actually blend in the sample replace to your original recorded track directly from Trigger. So for example, if I bring this all the way down to 0, then I'm just going to hear my original kick. And then I can up the mix to blend it in with my original kick. For myself, most of the time, I prefer to have my original kick on its own track and my sample replace on its own track, and then I can blend them that way. It also gives me the ability to process the original different than the sample. So if I want to add extra compression to my original recorded kick, I can do that without affecting the sample that I've added in. So let's do that blend now. So I'm going to close this, go to my mixer. I'll solo my kicks, and I'll bring my replace down, and then I'll just slowly bring up this fader to blend it in with the kick mics I already had. So I get a lot more punch in that kick when I add in the sample, but I'm still retaining the original mics and the original feel of the original kit. Now let's go ahead and do the same thing to our snares. So similar to the kick, I've got 2 recorded snare tracks. I've got my snare top, which sounds like this. And my snare bottom. And together, those sound like this. Which are sounding pretty good, but let's see if we can get them sounding even better. And you'll notice once again, those 2 snare tracks are outputting to bus 12, which is right here, bus 12, and that's collecting all my snare tracks right here. So I'm going to add, once again, one more snare track for my sample replace. So I'll just make a copy of that one, and then I'll rename this Snare Replace, and I'll also remove this EQ and compression that I had before. And once again, make sure that's going to the right place. So bus 12, which is what I want. And we'll once again copy our snare track down to the new track we just created. Now let's go to our snare replace track and we'll load in trigger. I'm going to stick once again with mono. And same like we did with the kick replace, we'll go to browser and we'll choose a snare sample that fits the song and the sound that we're going with. I was liking the snare 13 earlier, so I'm going to go with that. And I'll load in the Z1 sample. Now let's go back to triggering, and we'll just make sure that everything's triggering as it should. And if we need to adjust the detail, we'll do that. Okay, so that's looking great. So let's mix that in with the rest of our snare tracks. So I'll close this and I'll go back to my mixer. I'll solo my snare bus. I'm going to bring my replacement track all the way down, and I'll slowly bring that in and blend that in with the other snares. Cool. So you can hear that gives it a bit more body, a bit more decay to the sound as well, and not quite as dry as the original snares that we have in there. So I'll solo the kick and the snare together, and then I'll just mute and unmute those samples so you can hear the before and after. So this is with these samples to start. So you can hear how that really fills out the kick and the snare with those samples in there. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is add in the room mics. For this track, I wanted this kind of big, roomy sound for the drums. And I do have some room mics already in here, which those sound like this. So I'm getting a little bit of that room sound from that, but I want to add some more from the samples to get an even more bigger, roomier sound. So let's close our mixer for a second. And once again, I have a bus for my rooms. So these two recorded rooms are getting sent to this one. I'm going to duplicate this track. I'll rename this room kick. And I'm going to center this track. So put that back to 0 and make this stereo as well by clicking that little button there. Then I'll put the fader back down to 0 for now, and we'll copy our kick track down to our room here. And then we'll go ahead and load in trigger and stereo, because the room mics are recorded in stereo. I want to keep it that way, unlike the snare and kick where I wanted to keep those in mono up the middle. So for a kick, we'll go back to the browser and we'll go to the same kick that we were using earlier, which was kick 10. And we've got two different room mics to choose from. So we got these NRG room mics, and these were recorded in NRG Studios, and these are unprocessed, so no compression or anything. In the SSDR, on the other hand, these were recorded in a concrete warehouse, and these are processed with some heavy compression. So we'll listen to each of those and see which one we prefer. And now let's have a listen to the SSDR. I think I'm liking the SSDR for this, so I'm going to go with that. My triggering seemed all good. These are the same settings that I use with the kick trigger, so those should be fine because we're using the exact same sample material. So let's close this, and now let's do the same thing for the snare. So I'll just duplicate this track once again, and I can rename this snare. And we'll have to copy our snare track down. And now we'll go back to our browser and we'll replace that kick sample with a snare. So we'll go to our snare 13 and we'll put in the SSDR. Now I should mention you generally don't want to use these two together, the NRG and the SSDR, because you could encounter some phase issues using the two different room mics together at one. So we'll just go with the one that we like best, in this case, the SSDR. We'll go back to our triggering and we'll just lower the detail a little bit like we did earlier. Have a listen to that. Cool. And now we'll go to our mixer and let's blend that in with our original rooms. So I'm going to bring these down. My rooms, I'm going to bring the fader up for now, and then I'm going to blend those in with the overall kit in a second. Okay, cool. And now let's blend in our rooms. I'll bring these back down with our whole drum kit. So there you can hear how adding in those rooms just brings the kit totally to life and just makes it nice and wide, nice and big, and it's going to sound great in a rock song like this. So I'm actually going to group all my trigger tracks together, and that way I can mute and unmute those so you can hear the difference of that first on its own, and then we'll bring the track in and you can see how that sits with the track as well. And here it is with the whole track.
Feels that way because I'm wide awake. That's the way you like it when you're to the top. Don't have to be alone, working to the bone. Ain't got no more money, but damn, I'm feeling funny and it's a better way.
So there you can hear how those drums just come alive in the track with those trigger samples added to them. So I hope that's going to help you get started with Trigger and show you some ways that you can use sample replacements to help augment your drum sound. And if you're a Logic user like me and you want to improve your workflow in Logic, don't forget to download my free Logic Pro hotkey cheat sheet by following the link in the description below. If you have any comments or questions, please leave those below. I hope you enjoyed the video, and we'll see you in the next one.